The demise of the Georgia Bulldog football program and their defense has been greatly overstated. If the rest of college football isn't concerned, if they're not scared today, they ought to be. Welcome into this edition of the How About That DAWGSCAST. I tell you what, friends, when we look back over the last 5 recruiting cycles, one thing is clear, that anybody who wants to tell you that the Georgia Bulldogs have somehow just fallen off the table, that they're going to take a step back, that they are not going to be the same program full of dudes that we have seen stepping on the field over the last 4 or 5 seasons, just dismiss those people out of hand. They have no earthly idea what they're talking about. And I know you would do that anyway, but just know that you have good old Randy's blessing if you let them know what's up. Because I'm going to run through it real quick right here for you. In 2021, that would be 5 cycles ago, if we're talking about high school recruiting. And now, I should preface this by saying, all of the numbers I'm about to give you are from rivals.com. Now, if you go to other recruiting sites, they might have a different number here or there by a spot or two, but just so we're all on the same page, for tonight's purposes, I will be referencing the recruiting rankings from our good buddies over at rivals.com. If you go back to 2021, the Georgia Bulldogs finished in Rivals rankings with the number 5 class overall. In 2022, that bumped up to number 3. Then if you look at 2023, they continued the climb, moving up to number 2. And then in 2024, Georgia was the unanimous pick across all of the recruiting services with the number 1 recruiting class in the country. Do you see a theme here? Then, of course, in 2025, this latest cycle, the Dogs finished, according to Rivals, with the number 2 class overall, mere percentage points off the number 1 class overall. Now, with all that said, I, better than anybody else, fully understand that anything you did in high school doesn't matter. You can wipe it clean because anything you did there will not carry over. You are not playing against the same guys. You are certainly not playing at the same level. You just got to get rid of it. But what you can take from those rankings is that, for the most part, everybody who keeps a keen eye on this sort of thing seems to think that you're a pretty good player. So what does that mean for Georgia? Well, for Georgia, clearly it means that they are staying in the top 5 nationally in recruiting rankings. And also, I want you to keep in mind that I'm going to mention a few particular names throughout the course of this episode tonight, but everybody that I mention to you is a blue chip player. What does blue chip mean? That means that according to the majority of the recruiting ranking systems, you are rated at a 4-star or higher level. That qualifies you as a blue chipper. Okay? As we do these numbers, just keep that in mind. So like I said, Georgia went 5-3-2-1-2 in the last 5 recruiting classes. So the one thing that's for certain, regardless of who may or may not have decided to stay, regardless of who may or may not have had to take a medical disqualification or anything like that, the one thing that you can know for sure is that even though you may not know some of the names on this year's Georgia Bulldogs team just yet, you can be guaranteed that they are quality football players and players that the University of Georgia believes are going to be top tier players that are going to help them compete for SEC championships, entrance into the college football playoff every year, and national championships for the foreseeable future. But tonight, what I want to do is look specifically at the defensive side of things, because if Kirby Smart has made anything known during his time in Athens, it's that he's a defensive guy. You could hang your hat on the fact, with the exception of a year here or there, and by my count, I literally mean just 2 seasons. It may be 3, but you could count on the fact that Kirby Smart was going to make you play football the way he wanted you to play football. And you knew that it was going to be hard as hell to run the football against the Georgia Bulldogs. You might not know every player along the defensive line. There have been stars, no doubt, but for the most part, you have to have players along the defensive line working in concert with everybody else doing their job to build that picket fence and play team defense if you were going to have really good numbers against the run and if you were going to consistently be one of the top defenses in the country. Without a doubt, Kirby Smart has shown us that in Athens, under his tutelage, that's exactly what his dogs are. You don't have to worry about that part. For years back, before Georgia won the national championships, the thing everybody was worried about was not the defense. They knew that we were going to be pretty good on defense. You could just bank on it. They just didn't know if we were going to be able to score. And then they went out, made some adjustments, got some players, made some plays in big moments. Wing, bang, boom. Georgia's averaging over 40 points a game, winning national championships because the defense was in place. The last couple of seasons, and I have documented this on previous episodes, the numbers for Georgia, especially when it comes to stopping the run, had been not quite the numbers that we were used to. They hadn't been awful, but they certainly hadn't been what they were in their very best years. And that can be a little confusing because if you've been around football or sports in general for long enough, the one thing that you know for sure is that when it comes to statistics, there are lies, there are damn lies, and then there are statistics, because literally you can make them mean anything that you want them to mean, right? But you have to have some way to sort of put a frame around any given season. So we use statistics paired with, what we can see with our own two eyes. And the one thing that we saw last year from Georgia was, even though overall you might say that they were defensively pretty good, they weren't to the standard that you and I, as dyed-in-the-wool Georgia Bulldog fans, have come to expect. And if you look statistically, those numbers backed it up. So that just gave people around the country and a few Georgia Bulldog voices the opportunity to pipe up and say, that's it. That's proof that Georgia is on the way out. They are trending in the way of Clemson. They are trending out of the national spotlight. Well, first off, the Clemson comparison is asinine. There's no way that you can look at what Georgia has done based in the recruiting rankings and knowing what you've seen from the players on the field thus far and say, you cannot look at that and say, yes, Georgia and Clemson are on the same path here. They simply aren't. Now, I will admit to you and wholly buy into the fact that when we're talking about the transfer portal, that has allowed teams to sort of level the playing field a little bit, especially when it comes to the teams like Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, because what happens is your top line guys are still going to be just as good as anybody else's top line guys. But the difference is, and this was the thing that made the SEC so great for so many years, the difference is that the depth used to win games for Georgia. And now you may or may not have that. And if you do, it's young players that you're dealing with. So all of these things come together and you end up with the kind of season against the run and defensively that Georgia had last year. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same year over year moving forward. In fact, if I had to place a bet, I would place a bet that Kirby and the boys are going to get it turned around this year. Because trust me, nobody is more uncomfortable thinking about what it looks like to see his team get run on in crucial moments of the game than Kirby Smart. And if you think it means more to you, or if I think it means more to me than it does to the man wearing the Power G on his visor, we're just being nutso. So let's get all that out of the way right now. But the thing about what's going on with Kirby and this 2025 team is that, yes, they are talented. I don't doubt that at all. But as you can see from watching the snippets of practice we've seen, as you can hear when Kirby and the players step to the podium, the one thing that is absolutely certain is that this is a young team. It is very young. Somewhere between 30 and 35% of this roster are going through their very first spring practice here at the University of Georgia. That in and of itself is not a big deal because these guys are talented players and football is about development and growth and getting better every day. So yes, they're young, but it's like that saying goes, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And that's what these players have the opportunity to show everybody as we get ready to move into this fall. But what I want to do is take a look at the last three recruiting classes in particular, more so than, say, the 21 class or the 22 class, because for the most part, those dudes aren't with Georgia anymore. They've either graduated out or they're about to take a stroll on an NFL draft stage here later this month. And now those dudes are playing on Sundays, or they soon will be. Okay, so we're going to limit our further discussions to just looking at 2023, 24, and 25, and just exactly what does Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs football team have in the cupboard that maybe you and I don't know about just yet. Have you ever wondered why Kirby Smart is considered one of the top coaches in college football? Why he builds his programs the way he does, and why he's been so successful? It's because he's adapted the teachings of some of the best philosophical and strategic minds the world has ever known. These are lessons that help you be successful not only on the football field, but also in life. If you're interested in learning some of those secrets for yourself, the key is to help you change your life and better understand what makes Kirby tick. Good news is I've already done all the work for you. Just sign up for the Ring the Bell newsletter below and I'll send you my curated list absolutely free. And you can start to unlock the keys to help you dominate life the way Kirby Smart and his Georgia Bulldogs dominate college football. Get it today. Let's wind the clock back to 2023. The recruiting class of 2023 had a couple of 5-stars in it, but that same number of 5-stars are no longer on the roster at Georgia. A couple of those players have chosen to go somewhere else. They've had their own reasons. We're not talking about them. What we are talking about, though, is the 5-star Jordan Hall, who was a member of that class. Now, you may know Jordan Hall if you are, as I said, a red and black Georgia Bulldog through and through. You know exactly who I'm talking about, the 5-star out of Jacksonville, who came in much ballyhooed, but since he's been here, although he's had an opportunity to play, he has had a string of injuries. And to the young man's credit, he's pushed through, found his way to the other side, and now appears to be healthy and every bit the disruptive force that they thought he was going to be when he got on campus in Athens. It's not his fault that he got hurt. That's part of the game. The best he can do is come through it and show up when he gets his opportunity. So we're going to start with Jordan Hall, but let me just give you a few other names here that you might recognize that are going to show up on the field for Georgia this year. We're talking about Daniel Harris, the cornerback. We saw him play last year, essentially running Julian Humphrey out of the city, who Julian was the starter, got beat out by Daniel Harris, and now is on his way to play for somebody else. That's how it goes at Georgia. You're either good enough or you're not. So Daniel Harris is a name we all know. Kyron Jones is a name that we're going to get to know as we move into the 2025 season. What about Jonel Aguero? That's another cat that was rated a 5-star by some services, not by rivals, not for these purposes tonight, but a guy that clearly is a blue chip player who has already seen the field and had an impact for Georgia. He's also dealt with some injuries along the way. You have Raylan Wilson, CJ Allen, and Gabe Harris also in that class. These are the players that now, due to the natural attrition of the game, players leaving to go to the NFL or players entering the transfer portal, these are the guys that are front and center as the leaders on that defensive side of the football. All of them are blue chip players, and all of them have stepped up and began to take a role on this team as guys that are really going to make a difference. Now, you heard me mention Raylan Wilson, who, by the way, and I'm going to go on record right now and tell you, I think is a player that is being woefully under-discussed here during the offseason, who appears to be loading a really big 2025 season. His natural playmaking ability is going to take over for him this year, I think, and we are really going to see a breakout from him. We also know that CJ Allen is a guy that I've said here before, I really hope can take that third-year step and become a Butkus-level player for the Dogs. Those two guys are going to be on the field all the time, as will Gabe Harris, Aguero, and then Jordan Hall. That brings us back to him. Because one of the things that even the most casual Georgia Bulldog fan is going to know is that over the last few years, defensive line has been a position of great strength for Georgia. But when you have those guys who eat up all the snaps for the most part and are dominant players, you have to have them on the field. You want them on the field because that's your best chance to win. That, paired with injuries, has kept players like Jordan Hall from having the sort of impact so far that we thought he might. But this is the year where Jordan Hall is going to be looked at to be one of the anchors of that front unit. And if that defensive unit as a whole, and specifically the rush defense, is going to be any better, it's going to be because of guys like Jordan Hall showing up, stepping up, and actually taking advantage of the opportunity that they have here in 2025. But that's just the 2023 class. We've still got 2 more to roll through right here. Let's look at 24. Now, this one should be fresh on your minds because this was the class that came in prior to last season. And there are a handful of these guys that played a ton of snaps for Georgia last fall. That's great because it shows us just in fact how talented they were, and it gave them a year of experience to sort of accelerate their learning curve and get them ready to be the kind of primetime players that they have to be for Georgia here in 2025. So let's run through it. We're talking about, and let's rattle off the 5 stars here first, because there's a bucket full of them. KJ Bolden, Justin Williams, Joseph Jonah Ajanye, JJA, I may refer to him the rest of the way, and Ellis Robinson III. Now, Bolden, Justin Williams, and Ellis Robinson were all the number 1 player at their position in the country coming out of that class. So whether they had any reps last season or not, that should tell you the kind of player we're talking about. But now we know that they actually got out there, were able to make impactful plays for Georgia last year, get some, water under the bridge, as it were, and now they are ready and going to be looked at as guys that are absolutely going to be depended on here in 2024. I mean, you've got guys like CJ Allen. We know he's going to be out there. We know he's going to be probably the lead dog for this pack. Him and Gabe Harris, who are going to be trying to make plays off the edge in the pass rush game. And I've already told you how I feel about Raylan Wilson. I think he is really going to have a huge season this year. But when we're talking about guys like KJ Bolden, I know we lost to Malachi Starks, a first-round level NFL player. But then you've got a guy like KJ Bolden who has some experience and every bit the athletic ability of Malachi Starks, who's going to be back there on the back end for the Dogs, keeping things under control. I understand there's a lot of shifting sands as far as players coming and going between the portal and players leaving early and graduation. But when you recruit the way Kirby Smart and his staff recruits, you literally just build yourself safety for the future. I like to call it future proofing, right? That's what you're doing, because you're not going to invest everything that these young players have invested in them unless they believe you're going to be that next great guy, right? So if the coaching staff is confident enough to give them a scholarship, if the coaching staff trusts them enough to put them on the field as a true freshman, then I, as a fan, am not only going to follow their lead, but I'm going to cheer these young men on, because I know what has to happen for them in year 2. In every way, they have to continue to mature to get better, because that's the only way that Georgia is going to be able to do what we all want Georgia to do. But, it's what they say on the infomercials, but wait, there's more. It's not just KJ Bolden. I mean, you've got a player like Chris Cole, who was on the field, on the road at Texas, making all kinds of big plays. You had him recovering fumbles against Tennessee in a huge game at home late in the year. These guys were not just playing special teams, not to diminish that role, but they were playing key moments in huge games for Georgia down the stretch. That is such a blessing in disguise. And let me just mention the other guys that came in behind these 5-star dudes that are also blue chippers out of this last year's class. Nasir Johnson, a 4-star defensive lineman who had last year to get ready. Guess who's going to be getting a shot to show what he can do this year? You've got Andre Evans, Chris Cole, who we've already talked about, Chris Jones, a name of a guy that maybe you and I don't know much about yet because we haven't had a chance to see him play. But his name is on the lips of anybody and everybody who thinks they know something about what Georgia can do defensively. They say this young man could be the guy that is going to catch everybody off guard when we actually get to see him play. You've got Nnamdi Ogboko. Quintavious Johnson, Q, is the other guy that you're going to have to check on coming off the edge. Opposite Gabe would be my guess. Jordan Thomas and Justin Green, both young defensive linemen that flashed last year when they had an opportunity, but have now had time in the system to grow their bodies, get used to the way the SEC football game is played, and are going to have every chance to show what they can do this year. Then there's DeMello Jones, a player out of South Georgia who is absolutely electric and simply a playmaker when he gets the ball in his hand. And you pair him with a guy like an Ellis Robinson, you have your future corners right there. These are all guys that are going to play this year for Georgia. And we are going to have to do our due diligence to make sure we know who we're looking at when they hit the field. Because Justin Miller played some last year. But again, he was a guy who was the number 1 linebacker in the country in his class. And all we have heard from Coach Smart this offseason is just how hard he works, that he has that absolute alpha mentality that you need at a linebacker position, and that his game is getting better every day. Joseph Jonah Ajanye, JJA, had an injury last year, and we didn't get to see a lot from him, but he was another young player on the defensive line that was absolutely loaded last year in terms of players that had eaten up literally thousands of snaps. He still was able to get on the field early in the year last year before he got hurt. So it's like such a tease about what he could be now that he's healthy and able to get out there and practice with everybody else. If he can stay healthy, that's the kind of guy that we could really see break through here in 2025. And of course, that brings us to the true freshman from last year that everybody knew about and couldn't wait to see, and frankly, started to wonder where he was. And that's Ellis Robinson. We heard Ellis this week speak to the media, and he made a statement essentially saying, yeah, my freshman year didn't go exactly the way I thought it was going to go, but every day I was here developing. I was getting better. And so overall, I feel like I had a pretty good freshman year. There's nothing unusual about that. Freshmen come in always thinking that they're going to dominate the guys that have already been there because that's all they've ever known. And then they hit the brick wall of reality that is Georgia and SEC football. So Ellis is no different. And Kirby has talked about Ellis and DeMello side by side for the last year, talking about how hard they work, how they're getting it, how they're coming along. And when they actually get on the field, they're going to be absolute dogs for Georgia. I'm telling you, I trust Kirby Smart when he talks like that. And I can't wait to see DeMello. But then spring practice this year, you're hearing about Ellis. And yes, there are going to be a lot of players that are going to get on the field for Georgia at the cornerback position, probably early on in the season too, to kind of let them play when the band's playing, if you know what I mean, and get a good read on exactly how they're going to perform in the game. But the word on Ellis Robinson coming out of spring practice so far from the players who would know him best, they simply say it this way: he is a problem for wide receivers. That makes my ears perk up, because when you look at a cat like Ellis, who has the physical abilities, the physical skills, traits, build, all those sorts of things, and now he has grown into all those things and gotten up to an SEC level and is going to have an opportunity to be on the field, that just makes my heart go pitter-patter when I think about it as a defensive guy. It just means that if you've got KJ Bolden back there, you've got Dalen Everett on one side, you've got, let's just assume maybe that Ellis is the other starting corner. I don't want to assume, but let's say he's playing a lot. And then you've got guys like, oh, don't forget, Jonel Aguero, he's back there. Daniel Harris, he's back there. That could be the starter opposite Dalen Everett. You've got DeMello Jones. You've got Ellis Robinson. That's looking more and more like a no-fly zone here in the state of Georgia as far as I can see moving forward. Now, I could be wrong. There's a lot that goes into that. Can Georgia get after the passer? Can Georgia slow down an opponent's run game? Can they make them throw the football? But if everything comes together, that unit right there is a unit that would be as good as anybody in the country. So when people are talking about how far Georgia's fallen off, I just want you to remember all the talent that you and I just haven't seen yet. Just know that it's coming. That should get you fired up. Can you tell I'm pretty fired up? It's getting me ready for the season. 2025. Let's look at the class the Dogs just signed. Because just like some of these guys from 2024 who were able to get on the field last year as true freshmen, this 2025 class, Kirby just keeps stacking them up like cordwood. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to start with the big dog, the number one rated defensive lineman in the country, Elijah Griffin. Elijah Griffin is turning heads in Athens at spring practice. Now, he's a freshman, so I'm not saying he's going to blow up the world here. I'm not telling you that he's going to come in and win the Outland Trophy this year. I'm telling you that he is good enough to play right now at the University of Georgia, and that he's better than maybe you and I might have given him credit for. And that's a good thing, because Georgia's going to need him. They're going to need him to step in there and play big minutes for Georgia here in 2025. He might not be Jalen Carter level impact here as a true freshman, but one thing's for certain: he is going to have an impact for Georgia as long as he stays healthy enough to be on the field, because Georgia's going to have him. That's why they were able to get him on campus. And this is another young man who is from the state of Georgia, who wants to play for Georgia, who all he knows is being a dog and wearing the red and black. Give me that dude every day of the week. I sat right here last year and told you that if Georgia handled their business with the top players in the state in this last recruiting cycle, that it was going to be a very bright future for Georgia. There's only one dude that I thought they needed to get or could get that they didn't get. And he took his tail to Texas because he just bought the money bag. That's fine. Do what you want to do. Give me these guys who want to be Georgia Bulldogs, the guys who want to wear red and black all day and play for the state because they are about the state of Georgia. That's Elijah Griffin. That's who we're talking about. And he's not the only one. There's another 5-star in that class, Isaiah Gibson, who physically is ready to play right now. And Georgia's going to have him. Again, kind of like JJA from last year. Physically, he's ready. He is going to have to learn how to play in the SEC and play college football Saturdays. But physically, he's ready to be on the field right now. And Georgia's going to have him on the edge to help heat up opposing quarterbacks, especially as the season gets a little bit longer in the tooth, right? Because by the time you get to the back half of the season, especially as long as it is now, these young men are no longer freshmen. They've played enough ball that they know what's going on. And characters like Isaiah Gibson and Elijah Griffin are going to be counted on immensely for Georgia to provide depth and help this overall unit achieve all that we believe that they can achieve here in 2025. But wait, there's more. Their names, and keep in mind, these guys are all 4-star and above, okay? So we're not talking about me running out there. We're talking about dudes that have Sunday potential tied to their names, okay? So Anthony Crua, middle linebacker, Jonte Gilbert, defensive back, Dominic Kelly, defensive back. I'm rattling off these names because these are the guys that, yeah, they might not crack the starting lineup for Georgia this year. They might not get significant minutes with the first 11, but they are going to fill out your special teams units. They're going to be the ones running down on kickoffs and punt coverage and punt block. And speaking of punt return, when you've got a cat like Zachariah Branch that Georgia pulled out of the transfer portal, who was a freshman All-American as a kick returner, touching the ball every time an opponent kicks it or punts it, you want these dudes to do their job, to set him free, get him in a broken field, and let him do what he does best, which is put the ball in the end zone. So don't think for one second that these young men don't have an important job. Just know that they're talented enough and trusted enough to be put on the field, to be given that opportunity to get out there and do something special when the opportunity presents itself. Now, we can continue here because these classes are insane. This dude right here, Zayden Walker, remember when I said Justin Miller was the overall number 1 linebacker prospect in the 24 class? Let me introduce you to the overall number 1 linebacker prospect in the 25 class. Zayden Walker, right here from down south in Georgia. Another guy who is Georgia through and through, wants to be here, and is an absolute monster. Now, he has to beef himself up a little bit like Justin Miller did last year to take on the rigor of playing in the SEC every Saturday. But don't think for a second that he's not going to be able to do that. Don't think for a second that you're not going to see him. You will. It's just one of those things that's unavoidable. Talent is talent. Then there are names like Darren Akinabon and Jalen Morgan and a sleepy kind of pass rusher that might actually turn out to be better than anybody I've mentioned so far, and that's Chase Linton out of Atlanta. I'm telling you, Kirby Smart and his Georgia Bulldogs, they're ready. They're not going anywhere. They are young, and it's going to look a little bit different. But don't think for one second that the University of Georgia is going anywhere or that this defense is going to somehow become a Swiss cheese defense. Not happening. If anything, I think this defense is headed in the other direction. We can come back to this in a couple of years, look at the trend lines and see where we are. And anything can happen. Injuries, transfer portal, we all know the deal. But the bottom line is that the players on campus right now are good enough for Georgia to not only compete for an SEC title, but also compete to get back into the college football playoff and take their chance at winning yet another national title here in the very, very near future. If Georgia doesn't win the Southeastern Conference or another national championship, not only this year, but in any given year moving forward, that's all right. It's part of the game. But the one thing we shouldn't do as Georgia Bulldog fans is sit here and point fingers or throw rocks and somehow think that we know more than the coaches do, or that we would be playing this guy over that guy because of some high school star rating. That's not how it works. If Georgia doesn't win this thing, it's not going to be for a lack of trying. It's not going to be because they haven't put the very best players possible in the very best position possible to get it done. This is just part of the game. Georgia got some breaks when they won the national title, and then the last couple of years, a couple of breaks have kept Georgia from winning the national title. It's just how it goes. But I can put my head on my pillow every night and rest super easy, knowing that Kirby Smart has stocked the cupboards in Athens with elite football talent. Now, they just have to grow up, go out there, get after it, and prove to us and everybody else that they are who they think they are. Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs are young, inexperienced in some positions, but make no mistake, they are extremely talented. And anybody across the country who wants to tell you that Georgia is falling off or taking a step back, especially on the defensive side of the football moving forward, is someone that you should dismiss out of hand because they do not know what they're talking about. The good thing for me and you and other Georgia fans who are plugged in is that we know better. And we know that what we have to look forward to here in 2025 is just going to be a harbinger of great things to come from all of these tremendously talented football players that Kirby Smart has on the roster in Athens. Go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.